Right.
Welcome, welcome. Welcome to day 2 of the Builders Conference and the close of Philly Tech Week. I'm Danya Henninger. I'm Editorial Director at Technically. I joined Technically about a year and a half ago from a career in public media, and I was an entrepreneur myself also before that. So I'm thrilled to be here to talk about case studies on entrepreneurship access with Shelton Mercer, who is a serial entrepreneur and co-founder of Audigent, which just got snapped up by Experian in a big exit. It's a first-party data and identity platform. And he is a champion of virtuous innovation, which is a more inclusive way to think about innovation economy. And with him, we have his good friend and colleague, Scott Nissenbaum, who's the president and CEO of Ben Franklin Technology Partners of Southeastern Pennsylvania, which is one of the nation's most active seed investors. We were just talking, and Scott was correcting me that over his decade at Ben Franklin, they've overseen more than 400 early stage funding, raises. So that's a lot of companies that you've led through, into the path of entrepreneurship. So Chris talked about the pandemic, and I think that's one of the things that will frame the start of this conversation, because entrepreneurship has boomed since the start of the pandemic disruption. But it's not all the same kind of entrepreneurship. There's a lot of people who are classified as entrepreneurs, who are gig workers, essentially, and the creator economy. And they have their own businesses, but they are left without protections, kind of. So that they are entrepreneurs struggling and scrappy. And then there are also entrepreneurs who make it into programs that kind of lead them on the path to potentially successes like Audigent. So that's something I want to think about as we frame our conversation. Do you think let's see, this is a general question, so I'll ask Shelton. Do you think that entrepreneurship boom, this boom we're seeing, is a net good?
Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for that. Absolutely. I was just having a conversation with a colleague about how entrepreneurship and workforce development have a real synergy, if you will. Places where we see, we've traditionally seen workforce development as a government program, policy agenda to try to get people who are, and we use all the buzzwords, right? Underprivileged, underdog, under, whatever the hell that is. And it's about, getting people opportunities. And it's always this very different mentality that I've been anti, in the sense that we treat equity in venture capital and entrepreneurship as a plus. But in our policy, and unfortunately in our society, it becomes this kind of pejorative. To use the word equity becomes this thing like we're giving people something that they don't deserve. In our case, when Ben Franklin invested in Audigent in our first seed round, that equity they received was because they wrote us a check for a few $100,000. So they were contributing to the growth and the acceleration. We need to see people in our society as being contributors, investors in the society, no matter where they come from. Whether you're an Ivy League graduate or you're someone just trying to make it on the streets of the School of Hard Knocks, we need to be treating those people as investors in society. So entrepreneurship gives people an opportunity, one, to control their destiny a bit, and whether they come through an SBA kind of debt loan grant model or the model that I've followed, which is building companies that are backable by venture, that can scale rapidly and hopefully have larger valuations and provide extreme liquidity events for folks. They're both going to be improving the life of not just the founders, but also generations. So I am committed, and some of the things we do with virtuous innovation is trying to help some of the policy and power brokers in the world understand that entrepreneurship needs to be treated as a way to accelerate economic mobility and wealth generation. And it doesn't just have to be the Silicon Valley, the New York, the Chicago, the LA founders, or even founders who are fortunate to have partners like Scott and Ben Franklin to accelerate our company, and the many other investors that helped us. We need to see that as a value for society when we see entrepreneurship as a way to get people to the next level and the next strata of wealth generation for their families.
Thank you. And so, Scott, what have you seen as ways that work to, we can talk about what kind of policy changes you might like to see, but what works to make it more inclusive?
Yeah, when we went through and looked at Ben Franklin specifically, but the venture capital industry at large, the stats are pretty bad. They have been for a generation, and now our stats are pretty good. And I'll throw out some stats. I think 46% of our portfolio has racial diversity in the C-suite. 56% has gender diversity, and I use those words very specifically. We use the federal definition. So, but I think COVID kind of blew it wide open in terms of the remote worker. So you're no longer limited by where you live or what you need. You have access to capital. The flow from Silicon Valley outward, I think, has started. We just had a company relocate from Boston, raised $100 million. They came here because Philadelphia is known as the epicenter of cell and gene therapy. And they said, we need the talent. We can't get the talent anywhere else but Philadelphia. And so raised $100 million and relocated here. So kind of lost my own track of thought there. So come back to the question and then I'll get back on track. So
Sure. Well, that's interesting that you bring that up, the remote work. Part of that has led to probably the entrepreneurship boom, people being on their own and able to do the side work, gig work, get into different projects. How do we programs like yourself or accelerators, how do we find those people and bring them into upskill the people in entrepreneurship? I guess that's are there policy changes that we could advocate for with our leaders for making entrepreneurship more inclusive? What kind of policies I want to think about would we like to see at a city level or at a state level?
Yeah.
Do they already exist?
Not to the extent they need to. We're very close with the Shapiro administration, very supportive of his innovation agenda. He's poured a substantial amount of capital into it. And I think that needs to continue, but you're scratching the surface. And honestly, I think, I look at what Ben Franklin's funding and where it has gone, and it has declined over time, and the need has increased. And sort of coming back to that COVID question, I think a lot more people feel just as secure in their role as an external entrepreneur than they did in a big company, right? And because you don't still have the safety of I have my job for a generation has been gone for a generation. I think the policies, they have to take into account seed and early stage, have to be patient. Right. This is, there's a reason Wall Street doesn't invest in seed and early stage tech companies because it's a very long process. Audigent, which was an amazing success story. What year did you start it?
16.
Okay, so 2016. So 9 years later, we're celebrating an overnight success. That's a long.
Well,
slog.
technically it was 8, but
well, let's get into that. Could you take us on your journey as far as from how did you find investment, and what does that mean, that early stage investment mean, and what did it empower?
Yeah, we were, it's 2016, my co-founders and I, we all, we raised a founder, friends, and family round to try to get that MVP going, and we actually...
Can I ask you this?
Yeah, sure.
Did you have experience already with a friends and founder round?
Sure. I mean, I have a privilege of having Audigent be my 4th exit from a company. So that experience of raising capital, of building companies that have the opportunity to get to growth and then to scale, and my co-founders, Brian, Drew, are the same kind of guys. So we were a little bit ahead of the curve. It wasn't a first-time thing. But going to Ben Franklin was probably one of the best things we ever did. And we were, he pays me, don't worry.
That's right.
Dinner at Barclay Prime tonight on Scott Nissenbaum. We didn't want to. When you have experience, you're like, oh my God, I got to go through this whole 6 months of due diligence. And anybody in here that's done the Ben Franklin round knows that they put you through the ringers. But they bring some of the best and most talented people to get you in shape so that you are, as a young company, able to stand in a room with other capital folks and have the type of bona fides, have the type of substance, if you will. And so I told the story that 6 months with these guys, which we were clicking, clawing, scratching, screaming, turned into a 60-minute meeting with Warner Music Group and $2 million seed round. Actually $4 million, but $2 million to lead our seed. These guys were that kind of partner we needed early so that we weren't relying on our hubris or, we're so good, we know what we're doing, and you end up being a founder who goes through 200, 400 VC meetings and you've not raised any money, but you burned through all your capital. So very important part. And then I think you guys came in our Series A or our Seed Plus with the Go Philly Fund for another $1 million. And then you've got a relationship that now provides this type of scale where we can attract other capital partners like these guys.
Appreciate it, and I'm trying to avoid this being a love fest, given that he just had a huge exit and made this region real dollars. But our process at Ben Franklin is designed like boot camp, right? Like no one says, that sergeant at boot camp was so nice. That's not our job, right? Our job is when you're sitting in front of that strategic or that customer or that partner, that you are ready for that meeting, because we know the amount of money we'll provide to you is gonna get you, it's either gonna be a pier and you're gonna fall in and drown, or it's gonna be a bridge to that next round funding. And I'll just say, Audigent, of the 400 companies we did, there are few that did what Audigent has done. And so it was one of those like, we're gonna double next year. And I'm sure every entrepreneur you've ever looked at has said that. And then next year we'll double that number. And then next year we'll double that number. And you're like, I hope so. They actually did it. So it was definitely an easy one to get behind and support and engage. They also didn't have the people necessary here in Philadelphia to scale and grow. And I think that, back to it, they couldn't have done this 15 years ago, right? They couldn't have had the success that they had because they needed 150 people with experience and technical capabilities in ad tech. Right? Philadelphia's a wonderful market, and they grabbed the 30 solid people that were like top tier, and then they're like, we need another 120, what do we do? And so remote work comes into play. That's an opportunity for someone to get onto the bandwagon of Audigent, see how real entrepreneurs do it, get paid a wage, whether they're from Albuquerque, New Mexico, or Silicon Valley, or Pennsylvania. That has also opened up, I don't know if it's news, but Philadelphia moved up double in the ranks in terms of best cities in the world to build a startup. And because of companies like Audigent, because of the support from our governor, because of everyone in this room. But that wouldn't have been possible ever before, because people can work and take a job from Silicon Valley in Philly if they need to. They can learn how that's done, and then they can bring the dollars and the people here. So,
but from a hardcore, if I could, just because I want to be clear, we started in my brownstone office right in 18th and Spruce. We had 10 developers, hackers, software engineers crowded into probably about a 500 square foot space rather. And it was, again, that seed capital that mostly came from you guys and some others that helped us keep that team here to build out the first version of Audigent. And sure, when you're looking to build a scalable software company where you need full stack engineers that are some of the best and have the best experience, it's not a pejorative or bash on Philly, but we've got to be able to reach into other markets. But we were committed to Philly, and frankly, until COVID, we still had the office here in Philly. And so Philly is a big part of the story of Audigent's growth, and I'm really proud of that.
That's excellent. I mean, it does come back to, a lot comes back to local. And so how do we, I'll start this way. I like to think that Technically's work, how do we get more people to know that this is even a thing, right? To know that this is even something that they should be looking for a boot camp, right? Or they should be looking for an accelerator. And I just, we hope with our work at Technically that this is, we're sharing the resources, with stories, making inspirational stories about people who've done it. But how do we spread the word?
I'll look at it from a funding standpoint, right? When someone comes into us, most people are very good at the thing they do, right? That could be sales, that could be technology, that could be fundraising, that could be speaking, right? But they're not good at everything. And so when someone comes into fund as an individual, we immediately recognize we need to surround them with the other parts that they're not good at, right? It's not a coincidence that Audigent had incredible success, and you have Shelton with a skill set, Drew with a skill set, and then a third person. Like, there were three people that knew their lanes, they did what they did really well, they worked and support each other, they didn't get in the way. That's contrast to what you would typically think as an entrepreneur who's the run through walls kind of person who does it all themselves and won't take no for an answer. And it's like, actually, that doesn't work as well as, no, there's two or three of us and everybody does what they do really well with that same mentality and attitude. And so I think that's a really big component of it. For us, having that when they walk in the door makes the probability of our ability to fund them even greater.
Yeah, I'll add to that is the roles that founders play, and having a team, as to Scott's point, it makes all the difference. I mean, the fact of the matter is, while if you go anywhere else in the country, you can't get into YC or Techstars as a solo founder. You know, and I'm not a technologist. I know technology very well, but I don't code. And so playing a role, being able to find technical co-founder, being able to have the team that can build that together is important. But there's another part of this is the ecosystem. So what I'll give Chris and you folks at Technically a lot of credit for is you've been champions about the ecosystem, not just in Philly, but throughout the nation. I mean, certainly the northeastern quarter, but the nation has started to see that you need that type of storytelling, that convener, if you will. I have another part of my life where I created innovation districts and hubs, and I was a big part of the Pennovation Works and Pennovation Center here. And so we're building more innovation hubs. We've got a 50-acre campus in Indianapolis where my experience as a founder and operator, but also as an ecosystem builder, has been expanded by having the groups like Technically in my life, knowing Ben Franklin and what's possible. And so you now get to be able to multiply exponentially the impact that can have. A rural founder in rural Indiana, if you will, is facing very similar challenges and headwinds to be able to raise capital and be able to scale a company from the Midwest as a quote-unquote diverse person in Philadelphia. Now, they're very unique and different, but they have a very similar profile when a capital funder is looking at them. It means you're not from any of the cities that we like to fund. You're not from the schools that we feel like the founders come from. And we frankly have not deployed capital in that place. So what we're doing is going city to city, mobilizing leaders across sectors to help them understand that, yes, I'm happy to be a shining example, and I don't feel like we're on the poster boy tour here, but it's more than just me. There are many, many people. I'm looking around this room and seeing people who I recognize who are doing a really great work, and we're trying to include them in a national conversation that entrepreneurship, innovation is something that does not have to be stuck into certain pockets of wealth, but can be more egalitarian.
Don't do it alone. I think that's the message, right? Like, you don't carry the burden of entrepreneurship. There are 1,000 things that will ruin your business. There is no one thing that will make it successful. And most people cannot do that alone. Most people shouldn't do that alone. And so, find a partner, find a group, find an accelerator, find a mentor that can help you, because it will, whether you're part of a standalone one-person shop thinking to start something, or whether you're doing it on the side at nights and weekends kind of thing. Either way, I think that there's safety in numbers.
Do you think that AI, generative AI, will help entrepreneurs from underrepresented is the one that I usually use. Underrepresented in the broader picture. But do you think that AI will help entrepreneurs who might not think of it or might have less access to teams get to the next level, whether it's as a thought partner, sparring back and forth, or as someone who can design an MVP or help you code something? Will that affect, we had a remote work
I don't
shift.
think we fully comprehend the impact of AI yet. Yeah. I'll give you an example, and I won't use their name. The fastest growing technology company in the history of the world was created a year ago. Went from 0 to $100 million in ARR, 1 year. And it is a coding technology that basically you write 3 lines of code and it does the next 4 days worth of coding. I don't code. I mean, I took some coding classes, quickly learned I don't care where the stupid comma goes, this is not for me. But so now you're talking about companies that are putting together apps in a day, right? You know, and it's one person writing code and then saying, extrapolate the rest of this, right? I mean, that is incredible. So AI will absolutely do it. We jokingly say you're not going to lose your job to AI. You're going to lose your job to someone who's using AI.
Yeah, and I would add to that. You're seeing it. You're coming to it obviously from finding investable companies. For me, we invest not the capital, but the coaching, the mentoring, the infrastructure for companies to grow, which we're doing in our innovation hubs. To your point, the fastest growing companies, there's an entire movement. I'm part of a bunch of different groups and group chats and all sorts of Slack channels around this whole future of where generative AI is going. And one of the largest, most talked about things and the most desired is how can I become that one person, $1 billion company? And you're seeing the movements happen all over the world. I will say, one of the things that I know, shout out somebody in Philly. I know Suleiman Rahman is doing some great work at his center up in Germantown, and they've got AI cohorts that are already spinning out companies that are generating hundreds of thousands to millions for their founders. I've got another young gentleman, Aki, who was my lab manager at Pennovation, pivoted out of that and is building his entire one-person AI workshop. He has an entire enterprise around that. So I think that we're finding the gap, though, is we don't necessarily in quote-unquote underrepresented communities have that type of exposure early on enough, or even as a regular part of the world. So what we're trying to do is just get more exposure to these are tools that can help you rapidly improve the way you do business, whether or not you're starting an AI business or you are integrating AI into your workflow so you can rapidly grow or save cost as far as staffing and efficiency and all that stuff. So I think that there's a movement now where the gap we have, though, of course, is we have to have a much more robust conversation about why there are certain people in our society who always seem to be walking, running, crawling behind these fast-moving trains that are making people multimillionaires and billionaires overnight, and yet we continue to have this gap between the haves and the have-nones.
Mm-hmm. The haves and the have-nones.
And I do think this is probably the first generation or first time, in part because of COVID, in part because of AI, in part because of technology, where physical location was less of a barrier to entry than it is today, right? If you were born in rural Indiana, you had virtually no shot at using technology or innovation to break out there, right? You had to be in Silicon Valley. You don't have to be in Silicon Valley today. And I think that is becoming, even as much as we're resisting it, more of a global thing too. It started with outsourced encoding, and then my son started a company, and people are like, well, where's it located? I'm like, it's not. Like, there's a person in Maine, there's a person in San Diego, there's a person in LA, we have a guy in Switzerland who we acquire, and so there is no location, which is a challenge as a regional economic development authority who does place-based investing. I have this conversation pretty often of it's a lot harder to quantify, where are they, so.
And it's hard, going back to Chris's conversation earlier, his talk, his sharing knowledge with us about the research with us about that it really matters on a very local level who your neighbors are.
Yeah.
And so how do you encourage, is part of it the, closing the digital divide, which we've come a long way, but still getting broadband access to all the rural Indiana places. And getting broadband access, is that enough? Most places are still working on that. I think Delaware thinks they're going to be the first state to have 100% coverage. It's a small state, but still, that's They already the first state to have 100% broadband coverage. I mean, is that the main thing that will solve that issue?
I think it's a component, like the 1,000 reasons you can fail in a company, not having internet access is kind of a to me, and this is more my political standpoint, it's a utility, right? You need electricity in today's world. You need water in today's world. You need broadband in today's world. And we have to treat it that way so that you're not, because I can't envision a way in which anyone who starts from an economically disadvantaged situation can break through their without access to the technology the rest of the world has. That's too much to ask.
Right. So when I ask about policy changes first, that's a big one, right? That's a big one that could increase access.
Yeah, I mean, I think most people from a place like Philadelphia would be surprised at how many people in America still do not have access to broadband.
Mm-hmm. It is a scary stat.
And it is skewed to certain regions of the country, certainly where there's more, say rural and sub-rural areas, but it's also a policy choice to say, are we going to ensure that everyone has equitable access to what Scott said is a utility? But it goes beyond just the technology, right? It's about exposure, it's about aspiration, and we put so much emphasis on young kids a lot of times that, you got to dream big and know what you want to do, and then we put them in environments where they're just not able to think about anything except for, do I have enough food today? Do I have clean water? I mean, we have cities in America where kids don't have clean water. And we're on them like, hey, you got it, our their educational outcomes are not as high as some other areas, and yet we, pollute the air, pollute the water, processed foods. I'm not going to be in my political soapbox here, but there are the 1,001 factors that go into the failure or the lack of advancement as much as it goes into what it takes to make it. And so that type of balance, I mean, I have a privilege to be in a place where, we do have more resources than ever. But I can't start now as I've had a big exit and now I'm going to become altruistic and philanthropic. It's been a part of my life to be one who will be open to try to give, not just give back, but to include folks into society so we can have a more robust participation in the way that we're creating the new future.
And so I consider myself a technologist and an optimist. You can't do early stage tech investing. I mean, 65% of what we do is a failure. A failure as in it didn't accomplish, it didn't grow, it wasn't successful. But there's another book that I just read called The Singularity is Nearer. Highly recommend it. There's 2 chapters on there that basically just drone on and on about how being a human being today, by every measure you can imagine, you are better off than in the history of the world. That doesn't mean every person's better off. It means on average, people are better educated, healthier, living longer, richer, more exposure, again, any single metric that you can hone in on, we are on average as a species better off than we have before. And you have to point at technology for that. AI can make that even better, if we use it right and we don't mess it up, which we'll see. But I think as a positive note, like the opportunity, the exposure, the information, the technology, again, it continues to improve, and it is up to us as a collective group to keep that positive momentum.
So you mentioned metrics. How will we know if, on the smaller scale, if entrepreneurship is getting more accessible? What are the metrics that you look at or that we should measure, even technically as a news organization covering this? What would be is it, you mentioned gender parity and race parity of exits or starts, or is it something else, participating in boot camps?
So I would say you start with who's doing entrepreneurship, right? If you go back to the creation of the VC market in the 50s and 60s, it was a very, very 10 organizations, and frankly, it was 99%. I think this was a stat when I started my VC career in 1998. 99% of VCs were rich white men that went to an Ivy League school. That was it. So if you didn't, you're not in the game, you're not even starting in the game. Our stats are better, they're not great, they don't represent the community at large, but huge strides in who's involved, how they're involved, what we're looking at, what we're taking. We've taken some steps back recently, but.
So that's the stat you're saying has improved is who the investors are?
Well, and that's
Maybe
it. So when we initiated our activities at Ben Franklin, we started with who are we investing in? And a lot of my good board members said, well, that's not how you solve a problem, right? You solve a problem by thinking fundamentally about, let's start. We have a company that presented, and it was a product for African-American women's curly hair. And it went in front of our panel, and they hated it. Well, it was a majority of people that were not black women with curly hair. And so it was really hard to get your arms around a technology, or a space that you had no clue on.
Is that the one that went on Shark Tank?
It was Natural Hours. Mumbai is amazing. And she came back and she said, listen, I don't think I got a fair shake here. And I'm like, you absolutely did not get a fair shake here, right? She came back in, we had people that understood consumer products and healthcare and beauty and wellness, and like, this is gonna be great, And so we went through and we said, all right, who's evaluating our technologies? Who are we co-investing with on our technologies? What panels are we sitting on? Who are we investing in? Who's on our board? Who's making these decisions? Because, there's a bunch of good Harvard cases that diversity makes better improved decision making, right? That's a fact. I think there's science behind it, and so we needed to bring that to the table, and that's why I think we have the good stats, because it is, again, the same way it's not a one slice, how do you be successful as an entrepreneur, it wasn't a one slice to how we do better within that space.
And you touch on so many great points. That example of having, the lack of diversity in the decision-making process meant that this foreign thing that they saw just couldn't be a scalable company. What I've also been committed to is, as a man of color, is to be in the places of leadership that are not just germane to my ethnicity, right? And so it's so important that it's not just, well, we need an African American or a Latino or a woman or an Asian to be able to look at a black or a Latin or a woman product. It's that we need leadership to have diversity across the board. And so I see more deals and support more companies that are, frankly, white founders and, just mainstream products. My entire career has been in a mainstream space. And before Audigent, we were building technology for the entertainment industry, for Disney and the Jonas Brothers. So, but that doesn't
Very
change
white.
who I am. It's very, very, very vanilla. But also the breadth of experience and also the community. I think Chris mentioned about friendships, right? So my 20-year relationships with leaders of all backgrounds, of all stratas, has enabled me to have that type of relationship and reputation, so that I am in that room, I am at the table, I am able to convene leaders, and it's not just around, hey, look at this black founder I got here that I need you to look at, or this Latino founder over here. It is about, here's a really solid deal. Our ethnicity and our gender is not what's driving it. It's the fact that we have a choice of diversity, and frankly, that we are honoring the fact that there are folks who are not white men from Ivies who are still able to be some of our best leaders in the world. And I think we are finding, though, what's troubling to me is this kind of callback, this regression in society right now. And so it has become concerning over the past few years about how we are losing ground when we had made up so much. We've got to be committed to ensuring that our boardrooms, our investment clubs, our decision-making executive rooms are full of people who look like the world looks, rather than just like a fraternity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a whole different panel that we
Right,
could
yeah.
go down that road. But maybe I actually wanted to ask Sheldon, how do you decide when you're going around the cities and opening the impact hubs? How do you decide where to situate them?
Well, frankly, it's been mostly them who's decided. I started working with UPenn and the leadership there in 2014, actually before we even started Audigent. And so having a shining example with a top 10 Ivy League school makes you very attractive. So what's happened, we've got a lot of inbound. I mean, the folks at Indy found us because of what we had done to help build and create Pennovation, and then that turned into Indy and DC and Houston and some other places in California and North Carolina. So it's mostly for us has been that type of inbound because of the reputation. What we're doing now, though, through Virtuous Innovation is we're taking kind of a mobile think tank, if you will, into cities, spending one day, gathering 100 leaders, highly curated. I see Tiffany Standard here, who was with me in Atlanta, came all the way from Philly down to Atlanta. We had 100 leaders in Atlanta about a month and a half ago. And we're doing that in cities all over America to talk about things like economic mobility, right? How do you improve the economy, the talent, the infrastructure, the innovation, the preparedness of a region when you have something like, say, Atlanta, San Fran, Dallas, Boston are all getting the World Cup next year. And so billions of dollars are being invested into, and Philly as well. And what happens? What do we do with all that investment and the excitement? How do we use that to springboard improvements and advancements for the people who live, work, and play here? That's what we are trying to be very committed to. And what happens with the reputation around building these types of ecosystems, it's very easy for us to engage with leaders around the region because we already have relationships there. But for the most part, they, thankfully, my phone and my email rings and people are calling us rather than us trying to go out and find it. But I think we're trying to get to a place where with intentionality, I know with my team, we're looking at 25 cities right now that are very, very key based on where they are geographically and where they fit into the kind of global economy. So we are being a little bit more intentional, but at first it's like I'm an entrepreneur. You go where the water's flowing, you see where the growth path is, and you follow it until you can max that thing out.
So we get the question all the time, because there are 25 Ben Franklin-like entities across the nation. And we'll get a call from another one saying, hey, could you do a Ben Franklin in Albuquerque, New Mexico, or wherever it is? And we kind of came into, there's three things you need for a region to do technology-based economic development effectively. The first one is you need patient capital, right? And because I can't tell you how many programs where they're like, this administration put in $50 million and then 4 years from now they abandoned it. And it's like, okay, you literally abandoned it. It's going to die. You can't stop, right? You started and then you're stopped.
8-9 years for
Right,
Audigent.
exactly. The second one is that you need leadership. Because it isn't a one size wins all. So you need people like Chris going in and technically to help promote it, and you need entrepreneurs like Shelton, and so you need that capability. And then the last one, which is the hardest one, is you need a regional economic strength that people recognize. And that one you can't manufacture, right? If you look at Bio St. Louis, right? They focused in, they wanted to be biotech, and that worked for them, right? It could be manufacturing, it could be in Philly right now, we are known as the epicenter of cell and gene therapy. We're designated as an EDA tech hub by the federal government. They didn't give us the money, don't get me started. But we are seeing CHOP and Penn and Temple and Drexel, and we're creating the entrepreneurs, we're creating the bench scientists, we're building that epicenter here, and that starts to attract people. And so if you have those three things, you've got a shot at long-term success. And if you don't, you're in danger. So.
That's interesting. So of all these different places, the placemaking, most regions have some kind of specialization, and it's a matter of getting that into the next, bringing that up to tech.
Exactly.
Right? So in Philly, it's been eds and meds forever, and now that has evolving into biotech.
Yep.
And in Pittsburgh, where technically also reports it's, it was manufacturing old school steel, obviously, and now it's robotics and advanced manufacturing.
Yep.
And so you would hope, is there a way to encourage that specialization, I guess, I wonder. It's an interesting thing.
And it starts, I think it starts in an odd way. Like you get, it could be as you get lucky once, right? You have one exit in one company. We had a company in 1990 I was involved with called Traffic.com, right? And they had the monitoring devices on the roadways before cell phones could tell you what traffic was like. And then that was success when public it got sold. And then there were 3 more traffic companies. And then those 3 starters from the companies did and there were 3 more companies. And then all of a sudden we're like, well, are we like a hub for logistics? Like what happened here? And I think a lot of the regions have that, Walmart put its headquarters here. So now logistical, all around that. So same sort of thing. That did happen in Silicon Valley. It just happened in a much bigger, much stronger, and kind of perfect storm of things over there.
So we're getting close to the end. So I want to ask you one wish for increased. How would you like to see entrepreneurship change, entrepreneurship access the world of innovation? One wish that would make entrepreneurship more accessible and make this world have more people on the road to economic mobility. What is one thing that you wish for? It doesn't have to be realistic. The whole country to have broadband access. I guess that would be my wish. I'll throw that out there. You can steal that if you want to.
Yeah. My job is Philly, right? Regional economic. Ben Franklin only invests in the 5-county region around Philadelphia. And so I think my answer is it's more focused on Philadelphia. That very simplistically, we don't tell a good story in Philadelphia. I raise my hand. How many of you can name a unicorn that was founded and started in Philadelphia? Right? We have dozens of them, sure. Right? We don't tell anyone. It's like, well, Audigent wasn't quite a unicorn, but it was pretty close, right? We've had a dozen or 2 companies that have gone public and sold for $1 billion, and Spark Therapeutics. You've all heard of Sparks, sold for $4.5 billion. There you go. That's a unicorn, right? And so we don't do a good job explaining to the entire world how great Philly is in terms of the ability to start a company, operate a company, and live, all of that. So my wish, given that my day job is to try to promote the technology ecosystem in Philadelphia every day, is let's recognize, hey, you all are doing a really good job, and we continue to do a good job, and the opportunity is here, but we need to get the word out.
Yeah, I think what comes to mind is probably a word that most people wouldn't attribute to entrepreneurship, and it's another E. It's empathy. We cannot, in a region, the only reason why we've had some of the successes in Philadelphia is because what I will say about the Philly entrepreneurship community, especially we were together at this reception the other day, some of what we call the OGs who are people who have done this a few times and now are on their 2nd or 3rd company and decided to stay or at least keep a role here in Philly. As a early stage founder, you need people who care about not just what your ability to have MRR, ARR, and high valuation. They need to care about you as a founder. And the one thing that has been the biggest contributor to my success in any way is having someone who is willing to have empathy for me, my ideas, my proclivities, my eccentricities, and to develop relationship so that you're not just always in pitch mode. You need to be in a place where you can sit with the CEO of the seed fund and have a break bread together and say, this is really what we're trying to do, and we can do this, but we can do this even better with you. And you need that person to say, I want to put you in the room with these 5 other founders. I want to put you in the room with these 3 other technologists. That type of thing is relationship, and empathy is the biggest part of that. Regions like Philadelphia have to have more of it because in New York City, nobody freaking cares. I mean, San Fran, nobody cares. But I live in LA also. We have a very, very close relationship network of founders in LA that's very different than my experience in New York and San Fran. Mm-hmm. And so the through line of that is that people care. And you've got to care more about the bottom line. You got to care about the actual people who are building the company. And so the more I can put empathy into the ecosystem, I try to do that. Now you gotta be able to build something. You gotta be able to actually show your math and show your work, and we gotta have a pathway to growth. But empathy also says to a founder, "Hey, listen, I don't think this is working for you." To a team, maybe you guys need to think about doing something else and making and wrapping it down and going and study under somebody else so you can learn. All that comes as a package of humanity. I think we need more of that as in my one wish, if you will, not just wish, it's what we're doing. We're trying to put more humanity into innovation and more empathy into
I'm going to change my answer to his answer. So, I like his better. So.
That's great. No, so we have, treating broadband as a utility, so more people have actually even an opportunity to have access. Telling your own story better as a founder or as a region, and then having empathy. I think that's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And I believe next we're going to go directly into the next panel. So,
Thank you.
Danae is back. Welcome, Danae, back.
Yes, I'm back. Thank y'all so much. Appreciate that. Some really great insights. Scott, I wholeheartedly agree with you. We do not do nearly as amazing a job as we need to talk about all the great things that are happening in Philadelphia. I'm just here to let you know that we are about to take a quick break. There will be a 15-minute break, so please come back in 15 minutes because then you will be hearing from our second panel that will be talking about tech workforce and economic mobility. So take a quick break, come on back, you'll hear the chimes, come back to your seat, but please don't leave us, come back for a next second grade session. See you in a little bit.